What's up, LEGO builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios. Microscale builds are a great way to achieve both scale and detail in a MOC and allow you to build massive battles or even cities without breaking the bank or filling up your entire master bedroom with tables. I've done challenges in the past where I've built both cities and sections of planets in microscale, and today I am revisiting this tiny realm and building 6 of the biggest Star Wars ground battles. I didn't do any calculations of how many troops or vehicles were used. I just eyeballed it, went with my gut, and picked the biggest and most impressive looking ones. There may be some controversial choices in this video, so if you're easily triggered, make sure you've got your stress ball at hand. And if you're ready for some of the tiniest massive battles you've ever seen, don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button, and let's get started. I might as well get this one out of the way first. I'm not going to tell you what it is until it's finished to see how well you know your Clone Wars battles. This was the first large-scale animated battle I ever saw, and since then it has always had a soft spot in my heart.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Even though when you look at it from a more practical standpoint, the whole thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This battle also happens to take place in one of the coolest, really urban cities in the galaxy, and a place I've been wanting to build in a large scale for a long time. There's going to be a long straight road running down the center with buildings on either side. Here's another hint at what I'm building. This was the first time we see the AV7 anti-vehicle cannons in action, and I will be building some in microscale in just a bit. Here I want to note that while I'm building in microscale, not everything will proportion well to each other and be in the right scale. So some vehicles may look way too big or too small compared to each other or buildings, but you can only build so small, and I still want you to be able to distinguish what I'm making. This is a classic clone versus droid battle, and the vehicles on the droid side of things are AATs. This one is not my own design, but one I found on the web. It was the smallest looking AAT that still had some good detail to it. On the Republic side, there's only 3 AV7 anti-vehicle cannons, but man, these things can pack a punch. As you may have guessed, I built the Battle of Christophsis, not from the Clone Wars TV show, but the movie that came out in 2008. The clones are defending an artillery emplacement of anti-vehicle cannons, but the Separatist forces employ a powerful energy shield, which slowly advances on the clone forces, and none of their weapons are able to penetrate it. Right before all is lost, Anakin and his Padawan are able to deactivate the shield, and the clone artillery cannons are able to wreak havoc in the droid forces that were advancing behind the shield. It was a pretty simple scene to recreate, and while I think the battle and the surrounding buildings look really cool, I'm not digging the King Kong-sized AATs driving down the road. Now it's time to get the most obvious battle out of the way, the Battle of Geonosis. Featured towards the end of Attack of the Clones, this was the first battle of the Clone Wars, and still to this day is one of the most epic ground battles shown on the big screen in my opinion. It's the whole reason we watched Attack of the Clones on repeat, besides of course this little bit of cinema gold. That being said, the terrain is about as simple as it gets. So the first part of this build probably won't get you too excited, as I am just building a flat field of dark orange, but I will add some of those iconic Geonosian spires to one quarter to give it a little bit more life and texture. The exciting part will be making all the vehicles. This battle has one of the most diverse lineups of vehicles out of any that I make today, with most of the variety on the side of the Separatists. I'm making spider droids, Hellfire droids, Geonosian starfighters, as well as adding some of the massive Techno-Union ships and even one large Trade Federation core ship. On the Republic side of things, I have ATTEs and gunships, which is about all they had. There were some hpoe artillery cannons as well as massive dropships, but I didn't have the pieces or space for them, unfortunately. This has me thinking I should start a business of very niche birthday cakes that recreate in microscale the Star Wars battle of your choosing. That way you can celebrate another year of life by blowing out the candles of your very own Battle of Magito birthday cake. Even though it came out so many years ago, this battle is still one of my favorites to watch, and it seems every time there's something new to spot in all the chaos. I used round 1x1 studs to represent the clones and droids, and inaccuracy alert, I used tan studs for the droids when I should have used dark orange to be more accurate. The reason for this error is because I just didn't think about it until it was too late. Everything else turned out pretty good, but here's another painful example of the difference in scale I was talking about earlier. These gunships are about the same size as the core ship, which would look to be about as big as a small moon in the movie. Surprisingly, my favorite part of the build are the little spider droids. They just look so well proportioned and accurate to the actual build. Now it's time to build one of my all-time favorite battles in Star Wars, and surprise, it's not even in the Clone Wars. It also happens to be the largest non-clone versus droid battle ever shown. I think part of my love for this battle stems from the fact that Episode 1 is my favorite Star Wars movie. I love Gungans. and it's one of the few times we really get to explore alien military tech in action. I'm going to be building the Battle of Naboo, when the Gungan army materializes from the swamps and engages the Trade Federation forces on the rolling grass plains of Naboo. This is going to be another super simple build terrain-wise, comprising of a hill, some flat sections with a large blue shield effectively dividing the Moc in half. The fun part for this one will be designing the vehicles and creatures for each army. The Trade Federation side of things will have a few classic brown MTTs and some tan AATs. The Gungans had a few different creatures and things at their disposal, some of which were the giant Fumbas, which carried the shield generators, and the much smaller two-legged Kadu, which they used in a cavalry capacity and to pull supply wagons. I'm stoked to be able to build this battle in LEGO again, as I have done it once before. It was actually my first large-scale Moc I ever made on the channel, and was the project that made me decide to make large-scale Moc projects the focus of my channel. What more can I say about this golden bit of Star Wars media? A classic battle with the two massive forces facing off across from each other and marching headlong into battle. But unfortunately, the Gungans gave up the high ground and had basically lost the fight when Anakin managed to take out the droid control ship, thus shutting down all the droids. But their only and main objective was to distract the droid army and get them out of the city anyways. I included a couple of catapults at the rear, which launched huge balls of electricity into the columns of battle droids. The Fumbas turned out much better than I had hoped, even better than the large-scale version I built years ago. Everyone's favorite battle, the Battle of Mandalore. I never know what to call it, if it's siege or battle. Taking place towards the end of the final season of the Clone Wars, it was a great way to finish off such an amazing TV show and had all the ingredients of an epic battle once again. Gunship assaults, ATTE crashing through the city, and lots of combat between Darth Maul's forces and the combined might of the Mandalorians and Republic troops. The issue I'm running into now is what section of the battle do I build? This battle was so big and spread out, I can't include everything in one scene, even in micro scale. But I landed on the big clash of ground forces on a massive bridge, mostly because it's where we get to see the ATTE, and it'll be pretty easy to build. Mandalore architecture has fascinated me for a while now. The city is so chaotic and jumbled like a forest or jungle, but the buildings are square and neat looking, and for the most part, when you look at a specific section, everything seems pretty organized. Its most distinct feature has to be all the blue windows and colors everywhere, so I'm going to build a bridge coming out of a section of buildings and add smaller skyscrapers around it with lots of translite blue cylinders everywhere. I hadn't paid too much attention to this portion of the battle before making this, as most of us are more familiar with the portion Solid Brick Studios built, which is kind of the main throne room and city capital area. But I think this section is really cool as well. The fact that this whole battle takes place on a massive bridge inside of an even larger city is really cool and makes me want to build this exact scene but in large scale. Let me know in the comments if this is something you would like to see. Next up is one of the few battles we get to see the massive clone turbo tanks in action. I built Kashyyyk in my 6 coolest Star Wars planets video, so those of you who saw that will be pretty familiar with this build already. However, I am trying out something new with the frame. Typically when I do frames, I either make them square with a black frame or just do freeform with slopes and plates, but today I'm making a rectangular frame with a peninsula of sorts jutting out of the front. I did this because I realized if I made this the same size as some of my other Mocs, half of it would just be water, and I wanted to spend more time making the actual battle and not just placing down cylinders. Kashyyyk has some massive trees, so I'm going to add a couple of those on the beach, even though I think they were further back in the actual scene. As far as the vehicles go, the Republic only had the turbo tanks, but I mean, if you have those, what else could you possibly need? Although I think there were some ATRTs scurrying around. The Separatists had the classic snail tanks and some smaller dwarf spider droids, but there isn't really a way to build those in microscale. I should give the Wookiees a something as well, so I made a Wookiee catamaran. I learned aircraft are really tough to build in microscale because they're usually pretty small and delicate looking, so I tend to end up with oversized blobs. I wonder what these turbo tanks do when they're finished charging towards the water. Do they slowly back up and do it again, or turn around and try running stuff over? They don't seem super maneuverable, so it seems the Republic forces would be at risk of being run over as well. I added some of the wooden platforms running along the shore into the water, and even added the Wookiee who plants an explosive on the tank then dives off as it explodes. I like the overall shape of the Moc as well. I think it makes it look more interesting and saved me from a lot of boring cylinder placement. Last but not least, we have one of the largest and perhaps quickest battles of the Clone Wars, lasting a solid 5 to 8-ish minutes. It takes place on the planet of Malastare, home of the Dugs, weird-looking aliens, one of which is the main competition of young Anakin Skywalker in the Boonta Eve classic pod race. This Moc is by far the most simplistic one I've built. No natural rock structures or buildings buildings whatsoever. Luckily, there are some things to build in the vehicle department. The Republic's using a number of stun tanks as well as ATTEs and some giant slingshots. The Separatists, while only using AATs, have a ridiculous amount of them as well as a bunch of dwarf spider droids. I suspect that part of the reason this battle took place on such a simple battlefield is because of what happens next, but we'll get to that later. I don't think there was a stronger showing of Separatist force than what we saw here, but unfortunately it was all for naught because the Republic dropped a crazy new bomb that had never been tested in combat before, knocking out the entire droid army but also unleashing a giant Zillo beast who was asleep underground. The Republic forces now had an angry monster on their hands, so they zapped it to sleep with laser tanks and took it back to Coruscant, the most heavily populated planet in the galaxy. You know, the obvious choice. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough pieces to complete all of the Mocs at once, so as I got further down the list, I had to steal portions from the previous Mocs. Luckily, it was just round studs and vehicles. But here are 6 of the biggest Star Wars ground battles, and I think either the Mandalore or Geonosis Moc was my favorite. This was the last idea I had for microscale building challenges, so if you have any ideas for what I should do next, let me know down below in the comments, as well as which one of these was your favorite, and I will catch you in the next one. But until then, happy building.